Good morning, everyone. As Will said, I'm completely delighted to be here today. And I'm going to start this by asking you a question, which I'm going to answer, by the way. So if I was to ask everyone here, do you care about love? I think that some people would tell me love moves the world. Some other people would say love is completely overrated. Other people would say love is an illusion. I don't even think about it. If I was to ask, do you care about money? I would get a very similar answer. I mean, obviously, there are people who think that money brings 90% of happiness. There are people who actually think that money is the cause of all evils. However, if I was to ask, do you care about health? I would bet that all of you would say, I do. And you might or might not care so much about your own health. However, even if you don't care about your own health, you do care about the health of your children, if you have children, or do you care about the health of your parents? And if you, like me, suffer the consequences of globalization, you probably are quite concerned about situations like this. By 2035, there will be 100 million families in the world that will suffer the consequences of a disease like Alzheimer's. And when you are living in a different country to the people you care, your parents, you obsess about what's going to happen to them if they have to go through this. My own parents went through this twice with my grandparents. So unfortunately, I do have a very clear idea of how hard this is. Just to give you an idea, this cost $26 billion in terms of family care. And out of those $26 billion, 2/3 of that is paid by their own families. So, of course, as I said, you care about your close relatives. You probably care about the health of your friends. You care about the health of your community. And you probably think about your employees, too. It could be because you are a very empathic person, or it could be because you worry about how some health issues are going to affect your organization. So let me put some numbers into that picture. If you are in an organization with 75,000 employees, in 2035, half of those employees are going to be overweight. 7,500 employees are going to have type 2 diabetes. And as I said, this is a consequence of the lifestyle, the increased life expectancy, and so on, to the point that in the last 5 years, diabetes has increased by 41%. So the situation is only getting worse. Now, let me give you some numbers that for sure I think are going to interest you. The estimated cost of loss of production due to diabetes is $5,000 per employee. So if you have 7,500 employees with diabetes, that means 37.5 million. Now let me give you another number, sleep apnea, consequence of obesity. And unfortunately, it has been discovered that it's one of the causes for cardiovascular disease later on. Well, between 2 and 10% of your employees are going to suffer from sleep apnea. The cost of undiagnosed sleep apnea is $80 billion just in the US, a year. Out of those $80 billion, $15 billion are loss of productivity. And let's don't forget one thing, we are the lucky ones. There are 750 million people in the world who don't even have access to clean water. So what connects all of this? Well, what connects all of this is that we are failing to tackle these issues, and things are only going to get worse, and we have to do something about this. So these are not my words, but I actually love this sentence. Between the healthcare we have today and the healthcare we could have lies not a gap, but a chasm. This was said by the US Institute of Medicine. So let's analyze a little bit what is going on and what is my vision of what we could do to help, not to solve it, but to help. So every health problem starts with a journey, and a journey that might start many, many years before actually we start feeling any symptoms at all. It might start 20 years before in the case of some cancers. But how do we deal with health problems? So if you look at these pictures here, 2,000 years before Christ, what you have here is the patient, the physician. 1600, the patient, the physician. 1800, again, the patient, the physician. 2015, nothing has changed. So basically, the first thing we do when we have a health problem is that we have to go to the doctor. And in many cases, that contact with the doctor happens when it is quite late. In fact, 75% of health spending is reactive care. And we should change this. We should have proactive care as opposed to reactive care. We should shift this budget. And I'm going to talk about technology because that is what I do, so you can guess that. So you might wonder, okay, you say the doctor, but doctors already rely on technology. Yes, thankfully they do. Technology has proven to be an invaluable help to deal with very serious health problems. But the problem with technology at the moment is that it is very expensive. So technology is only used when there is a very serious reason to think it should be used, because we can't afford this kind of cost. Just to give you an idea, an MRI machine costs $2 million, and it's £300 per scan. But as I said, we are the lucky ones. We have access to MRI machines. In places like this, they don't have access, and the reality is there is no prospect of having access anytime soon. So what is the consequence of all this, what is happening in the world? Well, the consequence is that the cost of healthcare is only ever increasing. This graph is for the US, but similar ones for the UK. To the point that continuing this trend, by 2035, we are going to have a healthcare cost of 25% of the GDP. Of course, totally unrealistic, totally unaffordable. That is to keep the quality of healthcare that we have today. And I'm sure that if I said the situation in the UK is not any better, you will know this, because we keep hearing it on the press, we keep hearing it on the news. The NHS is failing, the standard of care is falling down, and we blame the government, and David Cameron is not putting money into the system. But, as I said, the problem is not now only. This is the problem, it's getting worse. There is no money to put into the system to keep at this pace. So, before I say what could we do to assist this process, let me tell you a little bit more about me. So I come from the very south of Spain, and I did an undergraduate degree in physics because of somebody got a semi-law for mathematics. And I was headhunted to do a PhD, so it wasn't a decision I had thought about. I just thought, why not? I was very young. And also, when I went into the PhD, I actually thought, okay, I'll say yes, and then I'll decide what I want to do with my life. There is a possibility to actually quit. And I almost did. But 6 months into my PhD, an accident changed my life. So I went to pick up a bunch of papers that I was supposed to read on a subject that I was totally bored with. And by mistake, I grabbed a paper that wasn't supposed to be in that bunch. So I ended up reading this paper, and this paper described what to me was a fascinating problem, but a problem that hadn't been solved in 20 years. By the way, my PhD was on integrated circuit design. So I did realize that if that problem was solved, it was describing a transistor. That transistor could create circuits that could potentially consume extremely low levels of power. And that was it. I was hooked. And I thankfully solved the problem, because otherwise my PhD would have been a total failure. And I proved that the orders of magnitude of power consumption of circuits could bring down by 3 orders of magnitude And I was actually offered an academic position at Imperial 6 months before I finished my PhD, with the condition that I had to finish my PhD before actually joining. And I have been here since. But the thing is that once I had proven that we could reduce the power consumption, I wanted to use that. I wanted to see the result of that. And I was looking for an application, but not just a little application. I wanted to try to help to solve big problems. And again, it was another coincidence that changed my life, which was that somebody invited me to go with them to a place called Chalfont. Chalfont is a place, it's a little village where epilepsy patients live for periods of weeks and get monitored. And I was totally shocked by what I saw. What I saw was that these patients were hooked to these big pieces of equipment, connected on cables, and they have to be like that for weeks, while their brainwaves were measured to decide whether something could be done about their epilepsy. And I thought, well, why can't we go for something that is the size of this room to something that they could wear all the time and they could go home and be monitored remotely? That was my application. So I started working with the medical director of the National Society for Epilepsy to try to create wearable technologies. And that's what I have done since. So I got the team that creates wearable technologies that facilitate the diagnosis and management of health diseases that affect a large number of the population. So my vision was this. My vision was, okay, let's try to create a fit-for-purpose healthcare in which you empower the person, the individual. So it's not just your doctor. I mean, I'm not trying to say we should eliminate doctors. Doctors are great, but they are a bottleneck. So how about we take part of the responsibility? But of course, this has to be for everyone, because diseases affect anyone. They don't affect only the technology savvy. They don't affect only the very educated person. They affect people who the only thing they might be able to do is to put something on their pocket if somebody is suffering from Alzheimer's. So the idea was, let's try to create technologies that are very easy to use, that anyone can use at any moment in time, that they don't require a doctor to maintain, to check the data, and so on. And they can assist the doctors in their role. So of course, this idea of self-care is not new. But what is kind of new is, okay, what do we do with the information we get? And how do we create these technologies that, as I said, anyone could use? So if we wanted anyone to use it, we needed to be using information and means of obtaining that information that didn't require a person to go to a diagnostic center. We have to use information that was already there. And let's think that we leak information continuously into the environment. So we could be sensing that information, but for that we need to create sensors, and we need to create sensors that are very small and non-obtrusive and easy to use and reliable. And if we create those sensors, the next step is we need to interpret those signals. And in many cases, those signals, we don't even know how to interpret them because those sensors are new. Those signals were never acquired like this before. And those algorithms that we needed to create to extract information needed to be very, very reliable. Because if they are not reliable, they cannot substitute your doctor. So it was sensitivity, it was specificity, it was reliability. It was something that could be integrated on something that was very small. OK, I'm talking a lot. Let's just listen. probably recognize many of those sounds. You could hear heart, you could hear breathing. That could be your body. This is information that your body is producing. So how about we take that information and we create means of automatically diagnosing problems related to that information. So let's don't forget something here. Sensing of body sounds has been around for a long time. I mean, the stethoscope was invented over 100 years ago. But the difference is that when you've got the stethoscope, and again, you have to go to a doctor, and the doctor has to be very, very well trained to interpret what they get from the stethoscope. And ultimately, it requires that contact, that appointment. How about we had a device that anyone could put, stay there, was continuously monitoring body sound, interpreting those body sounds, relating those body sounds to conditions, and in certain cases, giving an automatic diagnosis. And that automatic diagnosis, or those body sounds, could be relayed on real time to any doctor anywhere in the world. Well, what I'm describing is this thing here. It's ocupable. This is something that we have created in our lab. We have been working for a very long time on, so this is a very long journey, and it does exactly that. It's 5 grams, and it can automatically diagnose problems like sleep apnea, which affects over 200 million people in the world, and as I was saying before, costs, just in the US, $15 billion of loss of productivity a year. So some of you might think, well, this is supposed to be Foresight, 2035, but aren't these wearable technologies already there? Some of you might have a Fitbit or an equivalent one. And yes, there are some wearable technologies out there. I call them toys. That is what they are. Because they are great as something that you can have to give you a little bit of information. But any of you who has any of these technologies, you know that they work sometimes and they don't work other times. I mean, when my mother-in-law came on Christmas Day, totally over the moon because she had burned 2,500 kilocalories, having done anything on the whole day, I told my husband, I told you it wasn't worth the money. Anyway, I'm not trying to kill the Fitbit here. It's not about that. As I said, they are great. They do have a market, but they are not medical device. They cannot be relied on for automatic diagnosis. And we are very far away from that. Why? Because there is an enormous amount of work to be done in terms of accuracy. Because, for example, something like our ocupable, we spent many years of work of trying to find out how to eliminate all the acoustic signals that we were detecting from everywhere else that were stronger than our own body signals to be able to provide the right clinical information. So, and of course, they need to be accurate, they need to be safe, they have to be reliable. And there are many technological challenges to solve, and those challenges are a trade-off. So optimizing one is not going to lead anywhere. So we've got power consumption challenges because, as I said before, these technologies have to be very unobtrusive, very small, last for a long period of time. Why? Because you don't want an 80-year-old person having to remember to change their battery. Or you don't want to have this device falling continuously, which is one of the main issues with current sensors. And at the same time, and that obviously the weight and the size of the technology depends on your battery. And the battery size depends on the electronic circuits that you have there. So these electronic circuits require very little power. Now, there is the algorithmic complexity, what I mentioned before, because these sensors are very small. And also, I didn't mention this, but they have to be low cost. Because if they are not low cost, how we are going to make the world population use it? You cannot use the most sophisticated sensors in the world or the most sophisticated technologies. So these sensors are going to be picking up enormous amount of signals that you don't want to have there. You need to get rid of, and that is really hard. And of course, they have to be clinically accurate. But once those challenges are solved for every single individual technology, because there is not a recipe cookbook, you have to tackle every single problem independently. The next challenge is, how do we go from data to action? What do we do? So once we have this diagnostic for all these people, how are we going to treat them? And we need to think about that. And then there is this also practical challenge, which is translation. The issue is that at the moment, of course, there are regulatory bodies around us that take care of our safety, and any new technology that is used with patients, the patient has to be safe and the results have to be accurate. But the problem is that all the regulations, which are very, very complicated and it's very expensive to go through any regulatory process, were created for different kinds of technologies. And changing regulations is a very long and very, very costly and difficult process. So at the moment, we find that any new technology that is coming in has to meet those criteria of the old technologies that don't make sense within the context they are being used. So regulatory bodies will have to change. It will happen because they are acknowledging this, but it's very slow. And of course, there is a bit of clinical inertia. Doctors have to welcome these technologies. They are not going to take over their job. Absolutely not. It's that at the moment, we've got a massive bottleneck in healthcare, and we just want to make that bottleneck widen up. So where are we now, and where are we going to be in the next 5 years? So as I said before, we've got some technologies, wearables, that consumers use, and they are being used also in high-risk environments. So just to give you an idea, you do have air controllers using brain monitoring technologies at the moment, just checking very simple parameters, attention, for example, and with a big safety margin, or tiredness. But as I say, big safety margin there is important. They are already being used for testing in the military. The reason being that it's much easier to test things in soldiers than it is to test in patients. So they are much more welcome to trying anything that can improve their performance. In the next 10 years, what we are going to see, we are seeing this now, is an explosion in the number of biomarkers. So from a drop of blood or any other body fluid, we are going to be able to get enormous amount of information about diseases. And those biomarkers are going to be integrated into small platforms. Imagine a platform of the size of your iPad, where just by taking a drop of blood, you will be able to see in less than 1 hour, in some cases 20 minutes, information about enormous amount of conditions, many more than there are now. The nice thing about that is not that it's beneficial for us. You don't have to go to your doctor, and the doctor takes enormous amount of blood, and then the blood has to go to the lab, and you have to wait. How it will be done is that probably you go to the doctor, prick your finger, and then you got the result, your doctor has the result. But the benefit comes also for those scenarios I was talking there, underdeveloped world. You can take them there and carry out diagnosis there, because they will be very cheap too. And in 10 to 20 years, our houses will change, or at least I hope that. I hope that my parents, or even myself, can live for as long as possible independent lives without having to have somebody who takes care of them, or me. And technology can help this. And also, from my point of view, for example, I want to be in London when my parents are in the south of Spain, and when they are old, I want to have information of automatic information of how they are, not just what they tell me on the phone. They would always say, I'm okay, I'm fine. So we are going to be sensing for health. We have wearable platforms, handheld platforms, sensing infrastructure, and people very likely are going to be able to have personalized health profiles so that they can use to live better, longer lives. And this goes away from health a little bit it targets on organizations. So I have been managing people, my own research team is for 13 years. And something that I learned is that the happier your team is, the more loyal they are, the more productive they are. So keeping people happy is very, very important. Now imagine that you have sensors that can quantify what makes people happy. And imagine that these sensors can also be part of a system that, for example, creates personal circadian performance scheduling, or disposition-based task allocation, or team effectiveness analysis. So you end up having dynamic adaptation of your company that is going to increase your productivity, and at the same time, it's going to be your employers happier. So this connects a bit with our previous talk, with Will's talk. In Will's talk, he ended up talking about autonomous organizations. Well, this is one more step to make your autonomous organization a better place to work, a more efficient place to work. So maybe changing health is only the start. I believe that these sensors can be used overall to have a better, longer, happier, healthier lives. Thank you very much.